When Jack Dorsey, the founder and CEO of Twitter and Square, told people he was moving to Africa for a few months in 2020, it raised some eyebrows in Silicon Valley. After all, tech companies have consistently looked to China and India when they talked about reaching vast, untapped populations who are slowly coming online and needing smartphones, cloud computing, and mobile payment infrastructure. But it turns out in 2020, that sounds a lot more like Africa rather than China or India. For years, it was known derogatively as the Dark Continent, while colonialism and general ignorance about Africa's people skewed perceptions. Even today, if you listen to American media cover Africa, you mostly hear about famine, Ebola, and violence from militant groups. And while countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have had to deal with a recent spate of extremist violence, Africa is a big continent, and much of it is open for business. Today, Africa has more than 600 active technology hubs, organizations with a local address, facilities, and support for tech and digital entrepreneurs. That's up from 442 in 2018. Big tech companies from the US have noticed and are beginning to focus more and more on Africa as the next big market. Africa is home to 54 countries and a population of more than 1.3 billion people. And according to the UN's World Population Prospects of 2019, that's expected to explode to 4.3 billion by the start of the next century. The African population also remains young, very young. The median age in 2020 is projected to be under 20 years old. In 2019, 6 of the top 15 fastest growing economies in the world were projected to be in Africa, according to Focus Economics. The list includes Ethiopia at 1, Rwanda at 2, the Ivory Coast at 5, Tanzania at 10, Senegal at 12, and Ghana at 15. African startups last year raised $2.02 billion in equity funding. That's a new milestone, according to global investing firm Partech Africa's 2019 report on VC funding for African startups. Ben Lynette is a venture capitalist in San Francisco. His company, Lynette Capital, invests in African startups. One of Lynette's investments is in Flutterwave, which provides payment solutions for companies like Uber.
I'm really optimistic from a general standpoint that tech-enabled startups can be the driving force that has historically been lacking at building a lot of this basic infrastructure, allowing people to get into the middle class.
Last year, the African Continental Free Trade Area was formed with the goal of creating a single market on the continent and dealing with the ongoing issues like infrastructure and bureaucracy. The agreement couldn't have come at a better time, since many believe the continent is poised to take off. According to the London-based think tank Future Agenda, Africa's total GDP could hit $2.6 trillion this year. And GDP growth is projected to accelerate to 4.1% by 2021, according to the African Development Bank. With a growing middle class, that number could easily head higher as the continent tackles its lack of critical infrastructure. Only 43% of the population has access to electricity, and internet penetration on the African continent is only about 40% as compared to the more than 60% of the rest of the world. Infrastructure is one reason, but another is cost. American tech companies know this, but so does China. The country's Belt and Road Initiative demonstrates how serious China is about helping African countries develop the roads and travel infrastructure necessary to grow businesses. In 2017, there were more than 200,000 Chinese citizens working under contract in Africa, according to the Johns Hopkins China-Africa Research Initiative. And they worked on ports, pipelines, power plants, and railways. At the same time, a number of U.S. technology companies are working to gain a foothold in Africa, and some of the locals are trying to make it easier. David Osei is the CEO of Silicon Accra, a 60-acre technology park he's building in Accra, Ghana. The park will include residential and retail units as well as recreational facilities. It will also house the African Institute of Mathematical Sciences. The park will open in 2022, but he's already talking to large American tech companies about locating there when it's fully complete in 2023.
Africans, we love Americans because when an American comes to do a partnership with you, they leave knowledge behind. They leave you with experience. They leave you with empowerment. I'm not saying that we don't get that with the Chinese necessarily, but I'm saying that we are yet to have that model from the Chinese. We see the Americans coming in willing to participate, willing to train. So we want Americans to come to the party, or else they will come and realize that it's a little bit too late, because Africa is growing exponentially.
At the same time, companies need qualified workers to fill positions on the continent, but that is improving as well. Charles Laba is the head of GMEA, a Ghana-based tech group that works with fintech, manufacturing, and oil industries. Laba has worked with tech giants like HP and Cisco for the last 25 years, and he says when he first went into business in 1990, finding qualified people was difficult. That's beginning to change, though.
And so did actually quite a few other people in Ghana who have come in, who have been educated outside and come back to Ghana.
The end result is a larger pool of qualified people and increased dependence on technology.
The challenge about coming to Africa is really finding the right partners who is going to collaborate with you. And we still have our challenges in terms of the policies and in terms of creating a truly conducive business environment which actually respects the rule of law.
Big tech understands that, and it's already begun to maneuver. In November 2019, Twitter founder and Square CEO Jack Dorsey announced he would be moving to Africa. Analysts who cover Square weighed in on the move, saying Africa was untapped and underserved, that the region was the future of payments, and that Dorsey's move was forward-thinking.
Jack, I think, is looking at Africa as a huge growth vector for the company. I think if you ask him, his perspective will ultimately be around users and revenue. And then lastly, I think he's got a view that he has to figure out some way to decrease the hiring pressure here in San Francisco, and so by creating a more remote workforce, and he may lead by example.
In fact, mobile payments and social media are how big tech hopes to gain traction on the continent. Online retailer Jumia offers a cautionary tale about opening a consumer-facing business in Africa. After much fanfare, it became the first African tech firm to list on the New York Stock Exchange in April 2019. But the company has hit a rough patch and has been forced to close offices in Cameroon and Tanzania. After hitting a peak valuation of near $4 billion, Jumia's market cap has fallen to just over $440 million. U.S. tech companies know the potential in Africa, and they're well aware of the potential pitfalls. Still, many of them are making significant investments on the continent. Microsoft arrived in Africa in 1992, but it wasn't until 2013 that it launched the For Africa initiative, its business and marketing development engine on the continent.
From healthcare to agri-tech to fintech, there's really been quite a bit of investment that has been landing across the continent, but also just innovation, local innovation that is taking off as well in different markets. And look, different markets are at different stages as we look at it, but the opportunity for scalability of some of these solutions is actually quite there.
Microsoft is looking to promote its cloud technology, which it says will provide a number of benefits. Entrepreneurs will be able to deliver new services to market faster, businesses will become smarter and make more data-driven decisions, governments will be more transparent, efficient, and accountable, which improves local climate for business, and every citizen will have access to key services. But you have to have critical infrastructure, and more than one tech giant is focused on providing it.
Facebook's biggest problem of reaching all of its users is getting them on the internet cheaply. So what do? They help enable startups that are building cheap internet.
To that end, Facebook, Airtel Uganda, and BSC worked to complete a 770-kilometer network in northwest Uganda to bring mobile broadband to some 3 million people. In South Africa, the social networking company worked with Vast to connect with the underserved communities to Wi-Fi. And in Nigeria, it teamed up with Main One to build out 750 kilometers of fiber. Last year, the Wall Street Journal reported that Facebook was in talks to lay an underwater cable that would go around the entire continent and drive down the cost of bandwidth. The project is known as Simba, for the Lion King character. Meanwhile, Google has its own plan called Equiano, named after the Nigerian-born abolitionist and writer who was a slave when he was a boy. The plan would connect Portugal to South Africa. The first phase of the project is slated for completion next year. Google also has a number of initiatives across Africa, including Google for Startups, which announced last September it had started its first Africa Immersion cohort. It was a 12-week program meant to share expertise with tech startups from Africa. One of the companies they worked with is called Quara, which provides online and mobile banking services for financial institutions and members. Amazon has been in Africa since 2004, when the company opened its development center in Cape Town. The center focused on networking technologies and customer support software. In 2015, the company continued to expand with an office in Johannesburg. 2 years later, Amazon introduced AWS Direct Connect to Africa. Available in every country in Africa since 2016, Netflix is now programming to its audience. Queen Sono is a crime drama series coming in February 2020, and it's its first African original series. It features South African actress Pearl Thusi. More African shows have been commissioned from South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Nigeria. In late 2018, the countries in Africa signed an agreement to develop the African Continental Free Trade Area, an agreement the director of the International Trade Center called a game changer.
Africa is taking off, and it will be a good time to be involved in the transition of Africa as 54 different countries to Africa as a one continent on trade. This year, we are launching the African Continental Free Trade, which is a very big deal because all 54 African countries have agreed to now have a trade deal. Now, this is not just a trade deal on paper, but it's going to be trade that is going to transcend goods and services, intellectual properties.
In November 2019, the African Union met in Ethiopia to discuss its goals for its member states. The AU also wants to promote continuing education in Africa by creating a virtual university that will allow students to access from anywhere in the world. And it's also adopted cybersecurity as a flagship program to ensure that these technologies are used for the benefit of African individuals, institutions, and nation-states by ensuring data protection and safety online. African leaders, it seems, also know the importance of internet connectivity and are taking steps to improve it. Elon Musk, who's from South Africa, isn't going to wait. In January 2020, Musk's company SpaceX launched another rocket containing 60 Starlink satellites. Musk hopes to have 700 in orbit by mid-year, and to create a mega constellation designed to provide low-cost internet to underserved regions like rural America and Africa, even as the continent's demographics are changing. Consulting firm McKinsey projects that half of the populace in Africa will live in cities by 2030, which will help increase overall internet access.
My experience has been very positive in terms of how big tech interacts with these startups, and as I've said, how they rely on them in a lot of ways. And it would be easy to paint the picture of colonization 2.0, but the reality is we're still so early, and we need, as a continent, I think it needs all the focus and energy and resources that it can get at this stage, and we're far away from it being a competition type environment on the basis of there's just so much to do.
Africa is becoming seamless, slowly becoming, we're not there yet. I mean, they do have all these policies, as you said, in place where it's going to be open borders, open economies, open movement, and that's going to change all the dynamic massively. This inevitably has to happen, and I actually think if we Africans don't step in and make the best of it, we're not going to get anywhere. And so I think inevitably and organically we have to grow.